The alien delegation arrived on Earth with skepticism in their glowing eyes. Their tall, slender forms moved gracefully as they stepped off their sleek spacecraft. The surface of their exoskeletons shimmered faintly under the sunlight, making them look almost unreal. General Vorthak, the leader of the group, stood at the front. His expression was calm, but his thoughts were filled with doubt. He had heard stories about humanity, how they survived in harsh conditions that would crush most other species, but he didn't believe it. How could such fragile-looking creatures endure what even the strongest alien warriors found difficult? The aliens had come to observe an experiment. It was a test designed to push beings to their limits, a survival challenge meant for elite soldiers from across the galaxy. This time, however, the participants weren't aliens. They were humans, specifically human cadets who had volunteered, or perhaps been chosen, for this trial. The goal was simple: complete a year's worth of survival training in just one day. Time dilation technology would make each minute feel like hours, stretching the experience into something far more grueling than it sounded. Among the cadets stood Jake Miller, a young man with sharp blue eyes and a lean build. Though he wasn't the largest or strongest in the group, there was something about him that set him apart. A quiet confidence that made others listen when he spoke. Next to him was Laura Bennett, a woman with short brown hair and a focused gaze. She didn't say much, but her actions spoke volumes. Both Jake and Laura knew this would be no ordinary exercise. Neither of them had any idea how right they were. As the cadets gathered around, waiting for instructions, the aliens watched silently. General Vorthak studied their faces carefully. Some looked nervous, while others seemed eager. A few exchanged jokes to lighten the mood, though their laughter carried a hint of tension. Then, without warning, the simulation began. In an instant, the cadets found themselves transported to a dense jungle, unlike anything they'd ever seen before. Towering trees blocked out most of the sunlight, casting long shadows over the ground. Strange noises echoed through the air: chirps, growls, and rustling leaves. The atmosphere was thick with humidity, and the smell of damp earth filled their nostrils. Jake glanced around quickly, taking stock of the situation. "Stay close," he said firmly, raising his voice just enough for everyone to hear. "We don't know what's out here." His words snapped the group into action. Laura nodded in agreement and pulled a small knife from her belt. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Together, they started moving deeper into the jungle, scanning for threats and resources alike. The first sign of danger came sooner than expected. A swarm of insect-like creatures descended upon them, their bodies covered in shiny black shells and lined with razor-sharp mandibles. Panic rippled through the group, but Jake acted fast. "Form a circle," he shouted. "Use whatever you can find." Rocks, sticks, and even pieces of clothing became makeshift weapons as the cadets fought back against the swarm. Laura grabbed a broken branch and swung it fiercely, knocking several of the creatures out of the air. One by one, the insects fell, retreating into the shadows. General Vorthak observed everything from a hidden observation point. His antennae twitched slightly, betraying his surprise. These humans, they hadn't hesitated. Even when faced with overwhelming odds, they adapted and fought back. Most alien recruits would have crumbled under similar circumstances. Yet these cadets stood their ground. Perhaps, Vorthak thought, there was truth to the rumors after all. And if that was the case, then humanity might be far more dangerous and fascinating than anyone had anticipated. For now, the test was only beginning. The jungle was alive with danger, and the cadets quickly realized that every step could bring a new threat. After fending off the swarm of insect-like creatures, they'd regrouped to assess their situation. Jake Miller took charge once again, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We need to organize," he said, looking at the tired but determined faces around him. "Pair up based on skills. If someone's good at climbing, they scout ahead. If someone's strong, they help carry supplies." His words brought order to the group, and soon everyone had a role to play. Laura Bennett moved closer to Jake, her sharp eyes scanning the dense foliage. "This place is too quiet now," she whispered. "It's like it's waiting for something." Jake nodded in agreement. He didn't trust the silence either. The jungle seemed to be holding its breath, biding its time before unleashing whatever horrors lay ahead. Together, they led the group forward, careful to avoid stepping on anything suspicious or making too much noise. As they ventured deeper, the environment began to shift. The ground became soggy, and the air grew heavier with moisture. Before long, torrential rain poured down from the sky, drenching them within minutes. Streams turned into raging rivers, cutting off paths and forcing the group to rethink their route. Panic threatened to creep in, but Laura acted quickly. She spotted a cluster of large leaves hanging low from a tree and used them to create makeshift shelters. "Stay dry as much as you can," she urged. "If we get sick, we're done." Jake noticed a fallen tree nearby and called out to the others, "Help me drag this over. We can use it to cross the water." Working together, the cadets managed to position the tree trunk across a narrow part of the flooded area. One by one, they crossed carefully, their feet slipping occasionally but never falling completely. General Vorthak watched the scene unfold from his hidden vantage point, his expression unreadable. These humans were resourceful, far more so than he'd expected. Their ability to adapt under pressure was impressive, even by alien standards. Once they reached higher ground, the challenges only intensified. A pack of wolf-like creatures emerged from the shadows, their glowing eyes fixed on the group. Snarls filled the air as the beasts circled, testing the humans' defenses. Jake tightened his grip on a sharpened stick he'd been carrying since the start. "Stay calm," he instructed. "Don't run unless I say so." Laura crouched beside him, ready to strike if needed. When one of the creatures lunged, Jake swung his weapon with precision, striking it squarely in the chest. The blow stunned the animal, giving the group enough time to retreat further into the jungle. Despite the constant threats, the cadets found moments to regroup and plan. Laura discovered a patch of clay near a muddy bank and immediately put it to use. Using her hands, she shaped small containers and lined them with charcoal from a nearby fire they had managed to ignite earlier. "We need clean water," she explained to anyone who asked. Her rudimentary filtration system wasn't perfect, but it worked well enough to keep dehydration at bay. Meanwhile, Jake devised a way to signal the scattered groups. He tore strips of fabric from his shirt and tied them to tall branches, creating markers that reflected sunlight. "Follow these if you get lost," he told the others. "They'll lead you back to us." The strategy paid off when two cadets who had wandered during the rainstorm returned safely, guided by the makeshift signals. General Vorthak couldn't hide his astonishment any longer. These humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Each challenge they faced only seemed to make them stronger and more united. Even the most seasoned alien warriors would have struggled in such conditions, yet these cadets continued to push forward without hesitation. There was no doubt in Vorthak's mind now. Humanity truly was extraordinary. For hours, or what felt like days, the cadets pressed on, navigating treacherous terrain and overcoming countless obstacles. Every decision they made showcased their resilience and ingenuity, and though fatigue weighed heavily on their bodies, none of them gave up. They knew the test wasn't over yet, and they refused to let each other down. Somewhere deep inside, they understood that this wasn't just about survival. It was about proving something far greater. The jungle seemed endless, its dangers relentless. By now, the cadets were drenched in sweat, their clothes torn and muddy from hours of struggle. Despite their exhaustion, they pressed on, driven by sheer willpower. Jake Miller led the way, his sharp eyes scanning for threats, while Laura Bennett stayed close behind, always ready to act. Together, they had become the backbone of the group, keeping everyone focused and moving forward. As they trudged through the dense undergrowth, the ground suddenly began to tremble. At first it was faint, almost unnoticeable. But within moments, the shaking grew stronger, sending vibrations through the trees and knocking loose leaves to the forest floor. "What's happening?" one of the cadets shouted, his voice tinged with panic. Before anyone could answer, a massive serpent-like creature burst from the shadows, its scales glistening like whetstone. It moved with terrifying speed, its long body coiling as it prepared to strike. Jake reacted instantly. "Stay calm," he yelled, raising his makeshift spear. "Don't scatter." The cadets froze, unsure of what to do. Laura stepped forward, her mind racing. She noticed how the creature's movements slowed slightly whenever it coiled tightly. "It's vulnerable when it winds up," she called out. "Aim for its underside." Without hesitation, Jake lunged at the beast, driving his spear into the soft flesh beneath its head. The creature let out an ear-splitting roar, thrashing wildly. Seizing the opportunity, the other cadets joined in, pelting it with rocks and sticks until it retreated back into the jungle. General Vorthak watched the encounter with growing unease. This was no ordinary display of survival. It was something else entirely. These humans didn't just fight. They adapted and strategized with remarkable efficiency. Even his own soldiers would have struggled against such a formidable foe. Yet these cadets, inexperienced and outnumbered, had turned the tide in their favor. For the first time in centuries, Vorthak felt a flicker of doubt about his species' superiority. The victory came at a cost. The cadets were battered and bruised, their energy reserves dangerously low. Tempers began to flare as fatigue set in. Two groups argued over who should carry the remaining supplies, their voices rising until the tension threatened to boil over. Jake stepped between them, his tone firm but calm. "We're not doing this for ourselves," he reminded them. "We're doing it for each other. If we fall apart now, everything we've done means nothing." Laura added softly, "And if we give up, whoever's watching wins." Her words struck a chord, silencing the argument. Slowly, the cadets nodded, their resolve renewed. They redistributed the supplies evenly and continued onward, their steps slower but steadier than before. Hours later, the jungle was relentless, and the cadets were reaching their limits. Their bodies ached from hours of constant movement, and their minds were clouded with exhaustion. But the challenges showed no signs of stopping. Just when they thought they had caught a break, the ground beneath their feet began to rumble violently. The air grew hot, and a deafening roar echoed through the trees. In the distance, a towering plume of smoke rose into the sky. It didn't take long for them to realize what was happening: a volcanic eruption. Panic surged through the group as lava flows cut off their path, glowing orange rivers of molten rock spreading across the jungle floor. The heat was unbearable, and toxic fumes filled the air, making it hard to breathe. "We can't stay here," Jake shouted, his voice hoarse but urgent. He scanned the area desperately, searching for a way out. Laura's eyes darted around until she spotted a narrow passageway between two rocky cliffs. "Over there," she yelled, pointing toward it. "It might lead us higher." Without hesitation, the cadets followed her lead, climbing over jagged rocks and dodging falling debris. Each step felt like a gamble, but giving up wasn't an option. As they navigated the treacherous path, the air grew thicker with ash, stinging their eyes and burning their lungs. Some of the cadets stumbled, their legs weak from fatigue, but others quickly helped them back up. No one was left behind. Just as they thought they were making progress, a new obstacle appeared. A massive holographic figure materialized in front of them, blocking their way. It was humanoid but clearly alien, its body shimmering with light. Its voice boomed through the chaos. "Why do you continue?" it asked, its tone cold and mechanical. "You are outnumbered, outmatched, and powerless. Why fight when survival is impossible?" For a moment, silence fell over the group. The cadets exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to respond. Then Laura stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. "Because quitting isn't an option," she said firmly. "We don't give up, no matter how hard it gets." Her words hung in the air, simple but powerful. The hologram paused, its glowing form flickering slightly before vanishing completely. The path ahead cleared, revealing a steep incline that led upward, away from the destruction below. General Vorthak watched the exchange from his hidden position, his expression unreadable. He had seen many warriors face similar trials, but none had responded with such clarity and conviction. These humans weren't driven by glory or reward. They fought because they believed in something greater than themselves. Their determination was both humbling and terrifying. As the cadets climbed higher, the heat began to fade, replaced by cooler air. They'd reached a plateau where they could finally rest, if only for a moment. Jake collapsed onto the ground, his chest heaving as he struggled to catch his breath. Laura sat beside him, her hands trembling as she wiped sweat from her brow. Around them, the other cadets lay sprawled on the rocky surface, too exhausted to speak. Despite their condition, there was a sense of quiet pride among them. They had faced impossible odds and survived. Each challenge had pushed them to their breaking point, yet they had endured. General Vorthak couldn't help but feel a pang of admiration. These humans were unlike any species he had encountered before. Their strength wasn't just physical. It came from their unity, their creativity, and their refusal to surrender. But the test wasn't over yet. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of explosions reminded them that danger still lurked nearby. Jake forced himself to stand, his legs shaking under his weight. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice raspy but resolute. "Let's finish this." One by one, the cadets rose to their feet, their weary faces set with determination. Together, they pressed onward, knowing that every step brought them closer to the end of the trial, and perhaps to proving something far greater than survival. The cadets moved forward with heavy steps, their bodies pushed to the brink of collapse. The plateau they had reached offered a brief reprieve, but the sounds of destruction in the distance reminded them that danger was never far behind. The air was still thick with ash, and the ground beneath their feet was uneven and treacherous. Yet, somehow, they found the strength to keep going. Jake Miller led the way, his sharp eyes scanning for any sign of safety or shelter. Laura Bennett stayed close, her calm demeanor steadying the group whenever fear began to creep in. As they climbed higher, the landscape changed. The jungle gave way to barren rock, scorched by the volcanic eruption. The heat radiating from the earth made every step feel like walking through an oven. But the cadets didn't complain. They knew that stopping meant failure, and failure wasn't something they were willing to accept. One of the younger cadets stumbled, his legs buckling under the strain. Without hesitation, Laura rushed to his side, helping him back to his feet. "You're not alone," she said softly, her voice cutting through the exhaustion. "We're in this together." General Vorthak observed from above, his glowing eyes fixed on the struggling humans. He had seen countless warriors face similar trials, yet none had displayed such resilience. These cadets weren't just fighting for themselves, they were fighting for each other. Their unity was something he couldn't fully comprehend, even as he marveled at it. It was clear now that humanity's strength came not from individual power, but from their ability to work as one. The final stretch of their journey was the hardest. A steep cliff loomed ahead, its jagged edges making it nearly impossible to climb. At the top, however, they could see what looked like a clearing, a possible extraction point. Jake studied the cliff carefully, searching for handholds and footholds. "We'll have to climb," he announced, his voice firm despite the weariness in his tone. "Help each other up. No one gets left behind." Laura nodded, taking charge of organizing the group into pairs. Those who were stronger helped the weaker ones, ensuring that everyone made it to the top. The climb was grueling. Loose rocks slipped under their fingers, threatening to send them tumbling back down. The heat was relentless, sapping what little energy they had left, but they refused to give up. With every inch gained, they drew closer to their goal. When one cadet lost his grip and nearly fell, Jake grabbed his wrist, pulling him back up with all his strength. "Keep moving," Jake urged, his voice strained but steady. "We're almost there." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the top. The clearing stretched out before them, empty except for a glowing beacon in the center. It was the extraction point. Relief washed over the group, but they didn't let their guard down. Not yet. As they approached the beacon, the ground beneath them trembled once more. From the shadows emerged one last challenge, a towering alien construct, its metallic form gleaming menacingly in the dim light. It wasn't alive, but it was clearly designed to test them one final time. The construct extended long, claw-like appendages, circling the group slowly. Jake tightened his grip on his spear, ready to fight if necessary. But then Laura stepped forward, her voice calm but commanding. "We've faced everything you've thrown at us," she said, addressing the machine as though it could understand. "We're not afraid anymore." For a moment, the construct paused, its movements halting. Then, with a low hum, it retracted its claws and stepped aside, clearing the way to the beacon. General Vorthak watched the scene unfold, his antennae twitching slightly. These humans had passed every test, overcoming challenges that would have broken even the strongest alien warriors. They had proven themselves not just as survivors, but as something far greater. As the cadets activated the beacon and prepared for extraction, Vorthak turned to his fellow observers. "These beings are extraordinary," he said quietly. "They may be fragile, but their spirit is unbreakable." The simulation ended abruptly, pulling the cadets back to reality. They collapsed onto the floor of the training facility, gasping for breath and covered in sweat. Though their bodies were battered, their spirits remained unshaken. They had done the impossible, surviving the year's worth of challenges in a single day. And as General Vorthak gazed at them, he realized that humanity's true strength lay not in their weapons or technology, but in their indomitable will to endure. The cadets lay on the cold floor of the training facility, their chests rising and falling as they struggled to catch their breath. The simulation was over, but the weight of what they had endured lingered in their minds. Jake Miller rolled onto his back, staring up at the ceiling with wide eyes. His body ached from head to toe, but he couldn't stop smiling. Laura Bennett sat beside him, her hands trembling slightly as she wiped sweat from her face. Around them, the other cadets slowly began to sit up, their expressions a mix of disbelief and pride. General Vorthak stepped forward, his towering form casting a long shadow over the group. For a moment, there was silence. The aliens watched the humans intently, their glowing eyes scanning each face. Then Vorthak spoke, his voice deep and resonant. "You have accomplished something extraordinary," he said, his tone carrying a hint of awe. "What took our finest warriors many rotations to achieve, you completed in one cycle." He paused, as if searching for the right words. "Your adaptability, your creativity, and your unity are beyond comprehension." Jake exchanged a glance with Laura, unsure how to respond. They hadn't done this for recognition or praise. They had simply wanted to survive. But hearing the alien general's words made them realize the magnitude of what they had achieved. One of the cadets raised a shaky hand and asked, "Does this mean we passed?" Vorthak tilted his head slightly, a gesture that might have been a nod. "You have exceeded all expectations," he replied. "You are not just survivors, you are warriors." The room fell silent again, the weight of the aliens' words sinking in. These cadets, who had once been ordinary humans, now stood as symbols of resilience and determination. General Vorthak turned to his fellow observers, exchanging quiet murmurs in their native language. Whatever they were discussing, it was clear that humanity's performance had left a lasting impression. Finally, Vorthak faced the group once more. To everyone's surprise, he bowed, a gesture of respect that sent shockwaves through the delegation. It was an act unheard of among their kind, reserved only for the most worthy adversaries. As the aliens departed, leaving the cadets alone in the training facility, a sense of quiet triumph settled over the group. Jake helped Laura to her feet, and together they looked around at their exhausted teammates. "We did it," Jake said softly, his voice filled with disbelief. Laura nodded, a small smile breaking through her fatigue. "Yeah," she replied. "But it wasn't just us. Everyone here played a part." The experience had changed them. They had faced unimaginable challenges and emerged stronger, not because they sought glory, but because they refused to give up on each other. Each obstacle had tested their limits, but it had also brought them closer together. They had learned to trust one another, to rely on each other's strengths, and to push through even when hope seemed lost. Outside the facility, news of their achievements spread quickly. Humanity's reputation as a force to be reckoned with grew stronger, not just among themselves but across the galaxy. The cadets became symbols of hope and inspiration, proof that even the smallest beings could rise to meet the greatest challenges. Their story was shared far and wide, reminding others of the power of perseverance and unity. For Jake and Laura, however, the victory felt personal. They had started the day as ordinary cadets, unsure of what lay ahead. Now they walked away as leaders, their bond forged in the fires of adversity. As they stepped out into the sunlight, hand in hand, they knew one thing for certain. No matter what challenges the future held, they would face them together. And somewhere far away, General Vorthak gazed at the stars, pondering the indomitable spirit of these humans. Perhaps, he thought, there was much his people could learn from such resilient beings after all. The days that followed the simulation felt like a blur to Jake Miller and Laura Bennett. News of their achievements spread quickly, not just across Earth, but throughout the galaxy. Humanity had always been seen as fragile and unremarkable by many alien species, but now everything had changed. The cadets' success in the survival challenge proved that humans were far more capable than anyone had imagined. They weren't just survivors. They were fighters, thinkers, and innovators. Jake and Laura became symbols of hope and determination, their names mentioned in conversations everywhere. People looked up to them, not because they sought fame, but because they represented something greater, the strength of unity and the power of perseverance. When asked about their experience, Laura spoke simply. "We didn't do it alone," she said during an interview. Every single person played a part. It wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about working together. Her words resonated deeply, inspiring others to believe in themselves and their ability to overcome challenges. For the cadets, life slowly returned to normal, or at least as normal as it could be after such an extraordinary event. They went back to their training routines, though now with a newfound confidence. The bond they had formed during the simulation remained strong, and they often gathered to share stories and laugh about the moments that had tested them the most. Jake would sometimes joke about how close they had come to disaster, while Laura would remind him that they had never truly been in danger, because they had each other. General Vorthak, meanwhile, found himself reflecting on what he had witnessed. The aliens' view of humanity had shifted dramatically. No longer were humans seen as weak or insignificant. Instead, they were viewed as a force to be respected, and perhaps even feared. Vorthak spent hours discussing the cadets' performance with his fellow generals, trying to understand what made them so resilient. He realized that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or physical prowess, it was their spirit. Their refusal to give up, even when faced with impossible odds, was something his own people could learn from. Back on Earth, the cadets' story inspired a new generation of soldiers and explorers. Young men and women signed up for training programs, eager to follow in the footsteps of those who had proven that anything was possible. Schools began teaching lessons about teamwork and adaptability, using the cadets' journey as an example. Humanity's reputation as a formidable species grew stronger with each passing day, opening doors to alliances and opportunities that had once seemed out of reach. For Jake and Laura, the experience left a lasting impact. They continued to train and prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that their journey was far from over. But they also carried with them the memories of what they had achieved, not just for themselves, but for all of humanity. As they stood together one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Jake turned to Laura and smiled. "We did something incredible," he said quietly, "but I think the best is yet to come." Laura nodded, her gaze fixed on the sky. "Yeah," she replied. "No matter what happens next, we'll face it together." And in that moment, they both knew it was true. The challenges ahead might be unknown, but they had already proven that they could overcome anything, as long as they stood side by side. Far away, General Vorthak gazed at the stars, his thoughts lingering on the humans who had defied expectations. Perhaps, he thought, there was more to this universe than strength and dominance. Maybe resilience, unity, and the courage to keep going, even when the odds seemed impossible, were the true measures of greatness. And if that was the case, then humanity had much to teach the galaxy.